Hello everyone. I'm the Director for Common Knowledge Trust. We're a New Zealand educational registered not-for-profit. We've been around since 1996, and I brought all of the skills that I and hundreds of families had developed in the early 1970s into New Zealand in the 1990s and placed them all within a charitable organization. And then I've committed 50 years of my life to passing on these skills because families were so dedicated to developing them and so dedicated to using them that I was asked to be dedicated to passing them on. So today I'm going to talk about positions for breech babies and what families taught me. So I have no qualifications. I do body work. However, all the skills that the families developed, we just share the same human body. We all blink, we all cough, we all tighten up our rectum. And fathers were equally instrumental in developing these skills because they realized there was a big object in this woman's body, her container, and there had to be some way to get this object out and to do it safely. And a lot of that has to do with preparing our body for birth, and the other is how to get the baby out. What are the positions that help our baby exit our body? There's a lot of Facebook chatter about breech births right now, and there's wonderful training of breech providers who can help women deliver a breech baby. And that focuses on providers. So our focus as a trust is on us as women and men and our babies. What can we do to help safeguard our baby's breech birth? And that's important. Right now the chatter is about trying to change the position of the baby, as though a breech baby wasn't a normal position. It is a normal position, and many normal things mean that there are risks associated to them. The risks associated to them don't necessarily mean it's going to become a problem or that the problems can become a tragedy. It means if we're clever as human beings, we take risks seriously, we know that they're not generalized. In other words, even with COVID, we don't have a generalized risk. We know that it's a cluster disorder. We know that there are super spreaders. We know that people can range being sick, asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic, to dying. So we learn about risks. And we're specific because the risks of COVID is different than the risks of breech births. So we need to be discerning, and that's important. So today we're going to talk about positions. So you have a breech baby. So what are the risks associated with a breech baby? Well, one risk is that the cord will come down and then be compressed between the baby and the bony pelvis. That is a risk. It's not as high a risk as the next risk, which is that the baby's head, the body delivers, and the baby's head doesn't deliver out of the body. And that's important because the baby breathes out of its nose and mouth and not out of its butt. So we want to get the head out. And when we have a head down baby, then the head comes out first, which means that even if the body isn't coming out, the baby can still breathe in for its first breath or two. So the risk to a breech birth is that the head will get stuck. And the training for breech providers is how to extract the head and also how to help stuck arms to come out as well. The arms come out and the head can get stuck independently. So it's really important to understand that this is a big object coming out of your body, and you then can either help or hinder that process. I've been fortunate enough in the 50 years I've been involved in birth, because there was a period of time where everybody was videoing their births, where I have seen hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of birth videos. And I can tell you that since the 1980s, when they started to be filmed, too many women are getting into positions that are hindering their baby's exit from their body, because they are assuming that the positions that are being advocated for are actually positions their baby likes. So When I gave birth, I'd lay on my back with feet up in stirrups, and everybody in the natural birth movement said, that's not gravity. You're right, it's not gravity. However, gravity isn't the only thing that's important. The other thing that's important is how open are we and how mobile are the bones in our pelvis, to which most of us don't even know we really have bones in our pelvis, so therefore we don't know how to create mobility in them or how positions might impact negatively or positively what those bones are actually doing. And when you lie on your back with feet in stirrups, and don't trust me, get on your back, put your feet up like that, how open is your pelvis? Well, actually very open. And if you want to make a comparison between that, then sit back on your sacrum with your knees up, which is a semi-recumbant position, and ask yourself, how open am I? And you will discover you're not as open in a semi-recumbant position, even though you're in a better gravity position, than you are lying on your back with your feet up in stirrups. And that's important because your baby needs to come through your pelvis, right? And honestly, if a baby fits easily through our pelvis, whether it's breech or not, we could be standing on our head. But I'm not going to talk about the pelvis opening today or what we do to create space. I'm going to talk about positions. So if you want to compare positions, I want you to lie on your back with feet up in stirrups. Feel how open you are. Doesn't mean your baby's going to like that. Just feel how open you are. Now get in a semi-recumbant position where you're sitting back on your sacrum with your knees up. And you can put your hands behind you like that. That's very common. Feel how open you are. You're not as open. Now get onto your hands and knees. Now your hands and knees is not an upright position. Your arms and your thighs are upright, but your body's lying on its belly. It's just the opposite of lying on your back. But do you feel as open as you did lying on your back? And a lot of women will say, no, I don't feel as open. But something else happens when you're lying on your back compared to being on your hands and knees. And that is what your baby does when you're on your hands and knees. And you're going to see that in the video that's attached to this. So it's really important that we understand we have a relationship with our baby has a relationship with our body, and we can help our baby by the positions we get into, by getting into positions the baby's like. So the next position that is favored is squatting. This is very complicated. A lot of women, they couldn't squat for the life of them. I spent a third of my life in very traditional communities around the world, and I can tell you women around the world basically do not squat. I'm not talking about birth. I mean, just in life, they don't squat. They either sit with their legs in front of them or they sit with their legs tucked up behind them. Sometimes they sit with their legs crossed in front of them. The cultures where there is squatting is usually Southeast Asia, and they do squat. And in fact, if you go look at women planting in rice paddies, they're not squatting, they're bending, right? So when you look at squatting, and go look at squatting positions, those women tend to keep their knees closer to the midline of their body. Whereas if you look at people who are squatting in developed countries, the idea of squatting, they abduct their knees way out to the side. Now, many of us, as I said, cannot get into a squat for the life of us, right? But those of you who can, squat with your knees closer to your midline, and now squat with your knees out to the side, and pay attention to a muscle that runs from the bones you sit on to your sacrum. Because when you have your knees out to the side, that contracts that muscle. And that muscle contracted prevents our sacrum from being mobile. And it is the sacrum that's the bone that our baby moves out most. When our legs are more toward midline, you'll feel those muscles expand. And you'll also feel that sacrum have more mobility. It takes time to know this. As I got an email yesterday from a family that's just beginning to work through the skills. And the woman's concept was very simple. She said, I had no mindset that you had to have skills to do this activity to birth your baby. And that's what we have run into for 40 of the 50 years, because when I gave birth in 1970, the very first childbirth preparation classes were being taught in the U.S., and they were entirely skills. It was Lamaze and Bradley, entirely skills, because we had no choices. However, they were targeted to low-risk women. And actually, at that point, low risk meant breeches, twins, anything, because cesareans were only done at the risk of a mother's life, and there was only a 4.5% cesarean rate. That's a whole other story. So we delivered our breech babies vaginally in the 1970s, or our twins as well. They still had risks, and those risks were considered normal. Did they consider those normal risks to have a good outcome? No, not necessarily. However, a poor outcome was considered to be normal as well. Modern humans were not as risk averse as we are now, or we became in the 80s and the 90s, to which the medical profession responded to us. So when we're thinking of positions for our breech baby, we have to think about what positions does our baby like, not what positions we should get into. Our baby gives us a message in every contraction. Every contraction. That's what we learned in the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000 onwards. Because even though when you see this video, you're going to say, oh my God, the clothes they're women wearing, our bodies have not changed. So cut that out. Our bodies haven't changed. Our trust is not going to make a video for every new fashion. Our bodies do not change and never have. So you want to know what positions your baby likes. And that has to do with reading contractions. And it has to do, if you have an opportunity, to looking at some of the videos about breech births, because you will see what I'm talking about. Our baby gives us a message with each contraction. Every contraction we have has 5 phases. Most of us don't even know that. That's a story for another day. Contractions start, they begin to get more intense, they peak, they begin to go away, then they go away. That's 5 phases. If our baby likes the position we're in, that is what happens. And if that is what happens, then we have what is called a progressive labor and a progressive delivery. Now, second stage is always, the contractions are always a bit more spread out. They're spread out because this big object, the size of a grapefruit, has to then navigate down through soft tissue. And if that soft tissue is tight, then the baby needs to soften that soft tissue and let it spread. So if a baby barreled out of us, we would rip from our crotch to our upper lip. So you need to understand that the contractions in second stage are more spread out than they are during the dilation phase. However, they should still be progressive. What's a non-progressive contraction like? What's our baby telling us? Non-progressive contraction still sort of has 5 phases. It starts, begins to go up, and then it plateaus off and goes away. Okay. Those contractions, if they're done for an extended period of time, is a slow labor, and our baby is telling us certain things. And one of the things it's telling us is it doesn't like the position we're in. It's telling us other things, that we have tension inside our body. It's not telling us whether we're afraid or not. Babies don't care if we're afraid. Our body doesn't care if we're afraid. We can't stop a birth if we're afraid, if the baby fits easily through our body. And our baby can also tell us that our body's being compressed. So when you're in a semi-recumbant position, you're compressing the sacrum. And why is that important? Or if you're in an adducted squat, why is that important? Why is compressing the sacrum or immobilizing the sacrum important to our baby? Because when our baby comes down through the cervix, it has to actually turn the corner under the pubic bone. And to do that, it needs to move the sacrum. And if the sacrum is fixed, it can't do that as easily, so the contractions become more spaced out. So when you look at the videos of breech births, you want to pay attention to whether this contraction is progressive. It starts, goes up, it peaks, it starts, go away, or whether it's a non-progressive contraction. It starts, goes up a little bit, plateaus, dribbles off. When women have progressive contractions, their contractions can be quite steady and on. They have one, then they have a pause, then they have another, then they have a pause, then they have another. When a woman is having a non-progressive labor, dilation of the cervix, or delivery, the delivery of a breech baby, she has a contraction and there is a very extended period of time, and then the next contraction is a weak contraction or an effective contraction with another extended period of time. And this is what makes breech providers anxious, because they don't want the baby delayed. They want the baby to come out. So as I watch breech births, and I see a lot of hands and knees positions, which you will see on this video, your baby falls forward. If it was a head down baby, it would cause the baby's head, instead of deeply flexing, it causes the head to do this because the back falls forward towards the floor, and it makes the dimension bigger. If it's a breech baby, then from whatever's coming down first, the back and the head falls down, and that causes the baby to arch. It's harder for the baby then to come down. It's not gravity. Hands and knees will never be a gravity plus position, ever, ever, ever. You just have to realize that. You're lying on your belly, but your thighs are upright and your arms are upright, and so people are assuming that's a gravity position. When you're semi-recumbant position, you are in a gravity position and you're blocking your sacrum. We don't want to do both of those things. When you're in a squatting position, an abducted squat, you're in a gravity position, and once again, you're blocking your sacrum. So your ideal position is a position in which each contraction is progressive and your baby is coming down at each contraction in a reasonable manner. Now, if you haven't prepared your vagina, if you don't know how to create space, then there are issues. That's why all these skills are so vitally important to us, because we are giving birth to our breech baby. If we give birth to our breech baby and our baby comes out quite easily, boy, I'll tell you, everybody's relaxed. Birth providers who are trained or not trained in breech deliveries are just sigh of relief. Honestly, just a sigh of relief. When there is a delay with a breech birth, whether we are a skilled provider or not, we feel anxious. We're human beings. We understand the risk. So it's very important that you understand what positions may hinder your breech baby from coming down. And you can see this in the breech birth videos that are all over the internet. The women whose babies come down easily, there is nothing in their body that is blocking their baby from doing that. When there is a long phase between each contraction, it is the position of the woman, or her pelvis is compressed, or she has tension, and it's more likely she has tension in her vagina, or the positions are causing the baby not to be able to move under this pubic bone and keep coming down through and out. So what positions are good for breech births? Well, this is where lots and lots of births are really important if we're being honest about it. The best position for your breech baby is one in which you feel your pelvis is open, and one in which when you read the contractions you feel there's a good peak, and one in which you don't feel there's a huge delay between contractions in the second stage. Often, that position for many women is what's called an asymmetrical position. Instead of being on your sacrum with both of your knees up, you tilt over to one side, tuck one leg in front of you, and put the other knee up so that you can then manipulate the open space of your pelvis. You can also do that in a partial squat. Sorry, can't show you that right now. So if you're in a squatting position, drop one knee, bring your feet further apart, bring your hips and crotch lower to the ground, and then create space in your pelvis. However, unless you have something to hold on to, you are going to have trouble holding the upper part of your body up, and you are going to then lean forward or put your hands on the floor, which compresses the space of your baby and may then slow down the breech delivery. You always want to think object in container. How do you get the object to move down, through, and out? And this is where fathers absolutely excelled. When we are giving birth to our breech baby, we are focused inside. However, our partner, when they are skilled, sees us. They can see whether the positions we're in are creating effective contractions or not. If they are skilled. If they're not skilled, they just assume this is normal. So I've now talked over my 20 minutes. I'll try to promise I'm not going to keep talking over 20 minutes. So please check out the video. And as women going to have a breech baby, please understand our responsibility to ourselves and our baby is absolutely of a much higher watermark than whether we can or cannot find a skilled breech provider. We are the ones birthing our breech babies. We have to get our breech babies out of our body. And if we rely on someone to do that, then we are setting ourselves up for a complicated relationship. And I don't know how else to say that. It's like going back to where people thought we shouldn't be, which was, you're wonderful. You saved my baby. I love you. Because we are unskilled, we attribute to professionals aspects that we can reclaim by becoming infinitely more skilled to do this activity of birthing our breech baby.